Okay, before we start guys, no, let us pray muna. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, Amen. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, Amen. Good afternoon ulit guys. Um, before anything else, no, uh, I am your professor in Advanced Ethics. My name is Paolo Angelo C. Gibani. First graduate lang po ako ng MAP dito rin po sa Lyceum Apari. Please bear with me guys. Hindi ko forte itong advanced ethics na to. But I did my best na to summarize it lahat-lahat dito sa PowerPoint na to sa binigay sa akin na tawag dito na notes ni Father Dennis, no? Itong advanced ethics na to. Okay, let's start. Oh, yeah. So our topic, no, topic 1 is all about human beings. No? Human beings are considered moral agents and moral persons. Diba? In our undergrad, no, guys, sa morality or ethics natin sa philosophy sa undergrad, bali natakala natin to. Marami pa dito yung mga concept or terminologies na matadaanan natin na tapos natin sa undergrad. Pero meron pa yung mga iba na hindi pa natin na nadadaanan or something hindi pa natin na narinig kumbaga, no? So let's continue. Human beings are considered moral. Wait lang, may nagjo-join. No? Human beings are considered moral and agents and moral persons endowed with free will. And then through free will, we determine the course and objective of our own actions. As free agents, we are responsible for the consequences of our actions and the quality of the choice we make. No? As free agents, no, we are responsible for all the consequences of our actions. And it is our moral obligation to make the right choices. The greater the freedom and knowledge, the greater the responsibility. So, all in all, no, the end of all this is our desire to live well, live life, or to live a well-lived life. No? So, the focal point of morality, the rightness and the wrongness of action. So, morality imposes on us some rules or standards through which we determine what is right and what is wrong, and which eventually shape our judgment and conduct. But the moral wisdom by which we judge an action is not imposed on us by others, but by ourselves insofar as we are committed to attain a well-lived life. As free agents, we are free to follow the rules or not, but we must not forget that as a free agents, we are responsible for our own actions. So yung topic number 2 is ethics and morality. No? Tapos tayo dun sa human person. Morality refers only to human acts. No? That is, actions which proceeds from man's rationality, no? Done with knowledge, freedom, and voluntariness. No? And a moral act cannot be judged as morally good or evil. Norm or standards of morality is a measure, an action as good or bad, and gives reason why particular action is good or bad. And morals, it refers to the act or conduct itself. Ethics, it studies the norms or standards or codes that would define or determine the morality of human act or conduct. So the common denominator of ethics and morality is the morality of the human act or conduct. So ethics, also called moral philosophy, no, motivated by the fact that people strive to be responsible agents. Start from knowing which actions are good and which actions are bad. Ethics or moral philosophy, no, the science of morality of human act, deals with the issue whether an action is good or bad, and the reason why a particular action is good or bad. Now, sa topic number 3, good, right, and value, no? Good, right, and value. Good, the ontological bias, that which is objectively the goal or fulfillment of being man. No, yung ontological bias ng pagiging man is ito yung talagang fulfillment ng being man, no? Yung good na yan. And right, it has the connotation of moral obligation or duty that imposes on man. Value, assessment of worth, what an individual or group deems to be useful, significant, or desirable. So these are generally shaped by experiences and inseparable from the endless changing experience of our lives, no? Yung good, right, and values. What we value in the realm of human conduct are moral values. For example, love, justice, honesty, and many more. Moral positions and conduct cannot be separated from moral values. So, types of ethics. No? We have, number one, the meta-ethics or metasis distinguishes two types of ethics, the normative, no, and non-normative. Dito under sa meta-ethicist, no, we have normative ethics determines what moral standards to follow so that our actions may be morally good or bad. The two broad categories of general normative ethics is teleological or the consequential and deontological or non-consequential. Then number two, under meta-ethics is two areas, no? The general and applied ethics. So, general normative ethics, no, search for principles of human conduct. No? The general normative ethics, again, is a search for principles of human conduct, including critical studies of major theories about what things are good, what acts are right or evil. It determines what moral standards to follow so that our actions are morally right or good. It tries to defend a system of basic ethical principles that presumably valid for everyone. So that is the general normative ethics. And applied normative ethics is explained and justified positions on specific moral problems, no, like capital punishment, abortion. It is uses applying general principles in attempt to resolve specific moral problems, no? So yun yung applied normative ethics. So number three, no, the non-normative ethics, we have the scientific or descriptive study of morality, which involves the factual investigation of moral behavior. How do people in fact behave? No, that is a scientific or descriptive ethics. Anthropologists and sociologists investigates or describes moral attitude and codes, how societies differ in terms of this. No? We have two categories under that. absolutism, and relativism. And the second one in our non-normative ethics is the meta-ethics, or the highly technical discipline, no? Meta-ethics. Investigating the meaning of ethical term and how they can be verified critically, no? Terms like right, obligation, responsibility, good, and bad. No? Meron pa silang other critical meaning besides nung alam natin tungkol sa mga right, obligations, responsibility, and good and bad. So under sa meta-ethical no, meta ethics, no, we have the meta-ethical positions. We have the naturalism, no. Naturalism maintains the ethical statements can be translated to non-ethical statements, like autobiographical naturalism, no? It is an ethical statement simply expresses the approval of the speaker. For example, the king was right, no? Or the sociological naturalism expresses approval or disapproval of the next one is theological naturalism, divine approval or disapproval. So the non-naturalism is an ethical statement defies translation to non-ethical for ethical terms. Ethical terms can only be defined in terms of others' ethical words. No? For example, the king was right can be translated as the king's actions was proper or good. Ethical statements cannot be verified and determined as true or false, but we can reflect on them as true or false. So we have then emotivism or non-cognitivism. No, this is the ethical statements are used to evoke or predetermine response or behavior. So emotivism, they can be used to make someone feel or behave in a certain way. Under yan sa naturalism. So we have the ethical theories under sa naturalism. Ethical theories set of principles that serves as the basis in determining the morality of a human actions or conduct, provide the reason why particular action or behavior is good or bad, or acceptable or unacceptable. Meta-ethicists distinguishes two categories of ethical theories. We have two, the theological and the deontological. So, theological theories, also called consequentialist theories, actions, rightness or wrongness depends upon its consequences. So the problem in this is adopt a wait and see attitude to determine the morality of action. Ito yung tinatawag na theological, teleological theories. No? Adopt a wait and see attitude to determine the morality of action. So we have here the samples of teleological theories. Now we have the hedonism. The rightness of an actions depends upon the amount of pleasure or quality of pleasure it promotes. And, and then Epicureanism, no, the right actions promotes pleasure and minimize pain. And then egoism, action is right insofar as it promotes the self-interest of its agent. And we have the classic utilitarianism, no? The rightness of an action depends upon how useful or beneficial it is, as opposed to how useless and harmful it is. And utilitarianism is the right action is a give is a given situation, promotes the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people in that situation. Then lastly, the instrumentalism or pragmatism. No? Action is right if, number one, it proves existing situation or remedies some deficiencies, or lastly, it and revolves specific problem. No, yun yung pragmatism. But doon sa deontological theories, no, or tinatawag na non-sequentialists, is the rightness of wrong or wrongness of an action does not depend on its consequence. No, the fact that action produces goodness does not make it morally right. No, ito yung under dito, no, is the divine commandment theory that rightness is established by God, no, who establishes general moral law or standards that prescribes or prohibits particular actions. Action is good or bad if it conforms to these laws. And then we have the natural law theory. Moral standards exist in the very fabric or nature of the universe. No? Actions must conform to these natural moral laws. Then we have the social contract theory. Rightness is a function of rules and institutions, no, established in society or implicitly or explicitly agreed by its members. And lastly, we have the natural right theory that human beings share certain basic rights which oblige us to treat one another in certain ways, no, like universal and inalienable, or includes right to life, liberty, and property. And categorical imperative is nothing was good in itself except a good will. And the will is the uniquely human capacity to act according to the concept of laws and principles. So the moral principles require us to fulfill duties simply because those duties make valid claims. No? Yung sinasabi na act in is as much. No? Act in as much as. So we have the prima facie duties, no? The so-called moral guidelines that determines what we ought to do, yung tinatawag na obligatory duty, or fidelity in keeping promises, preparation, gratitude, non-injury, justice, and self-improvement. And the virtue ethics. One should seek to develop the character traits known as virtue and act in accordance with them. So, virtue theorists stress importance of developing good habits of character, such as benevolence. So, tapos tayo dun sa teleological theories, no, nauna kanina, and deontological theories under doon sa ethical theories, no. So let's go now dun sa common ethical theories, no? Common ethical theories. Common ethical theories, an action is judged as morally good or bad on some standards or norms. But several theories are espoused with different standards of morality. Is there a universal or uniform moral law, ultimate basis, which we can judge the morality of a particular action? No? Concerning of concern of philosophers and ethicists, no, don't quite agree on common answers. No, pero talaga kasi may iba-iba tayo na tinatawag na norms or standards per society. No? And the kind of moral ethical theory one adheres to determine how he judge or how he judging the morality of his particular action, consequently how he behave and act. Even he does not know any ethical theories, his moral judgment would fall under one of the ethical theories. No, even kids have their own way of justifying their own behaviors. In this sense, they are moral philosopher. So, tapos na tayo dun sa naturalism. Let's go now sa ethical relativism. Relativism, no? Sorry. So, we have the ethical relativism does not present any definite and objective standard of morality. No? Again, does not present any definite and objective standard of morality. So the moral doctrine by which rightness and wrongness of an action varies from one society or social group and culture to another. No? No universal moral standards binding on all men at all times. Morality depends on or is relative to the society, culture to which one belongs. No? So they are two forms in ethical relativism. The conventional ethical relativism and cultural relativism. So we have the first one is the conventional ethical relativism is offshoot of ethical relativism. No? No object, no objective moral principle that could determine the morality of a human action in particular social group. And moral principles are justified or equated to social acceptability or approval. Morality has absolute social character. If everyone is doing it and everybody accepts it, then the action is good. Otherwise, it is wrong or bad. Do what the Romans do. So basically, yan yung conventional ethical relativism. No? So young people or teenagers are generally conventionalists. They regard as morally right those actions which are generally accepted by their peers. No? So next one is we have the cultural relativism. Believes that culture have different moral codes. No? Kanina kung ano sabihin ng nakakarami, yun na yung tama. Dito, hindi. No? Because we have the different moral codes. So Ruth Benedict, no, an anthropologist, in her popular book Patterns of Culture, morality depends on varying histories and environments of cultures. Conceptions of right and wrong differ from culture to culture. No? Polygamy may be accepted in one culture, but not in another culture. So there is no universal moral law that bound every culture to follow. Wala. No? No objective standards to judge one social code as better than the other. So the right way is what ancestors practiced and handed down traditionally. Ito yung sa cultural relativism. No? That ultimately insists that we should adopt an attitude of tolerance towards cultures. No? Nakapokus lang doon sa pamana ng kanilang kultura. But dito sa ethical relativism, may mga objection dito. No? The conclusion that there is no objective standard of morality is untenable. No? It does not follow that since there are differences in culture, differences in social acceptability, some societies don't know universal truth or disagree with it, that there is no universal moral truth. No? Ito yung mga objections sa ethical relativism. Not Ethical conventionalism, no, moral principle keeps on changing and depends on social acceptability. No? Parang ito yung sagot dito sa ethical relativism. No? The moral principle keeps on changing and depends on social acceptability. That cultural relativism, no, we could, number one, we could no longer say that custom of other societies are morally inferior to others. Then two, the concept of morality will be constantly changing with the different cultures. So what is culturally and socially accepted is not always moral. No? What is culturally and socially accepted is not always moral. However, cultural or social relativism warns us about the danger of assuming that all our preferences are based on some absolute standard, that many of our practices are peculiar to our society. Therefore, we have to keep an open mind. No? So, let's go now sa ethical subjectivism. No? Tapos tayo dun sa relativism. Let's go now sa subjectivism. So, this is the idea that our moral judgments are based on our feelings. Yung kanina yung sa mga culture, no? Dito naman through our feelings, emotions, and prejudices, and nothing more. No? There is no such thing as an objective right or wrong. Morality is equated with taste. Morality is a matter of sentiment rather than a fact of reason. No? Emotivism, no, the form of ethical subjectivism, stresses that moral language is not a fact stating language or convey information, but it is, number one, means of influencing people's behavior. You ought to do that. Or number two, express one's attitude. I want to eat. No? This is emotivism. So, toward kanina, no, may mga objection din dito sa ethical subjectivism. No? Feelings and emotion, no, are not standards of what is right and what is wrong. If we feel good about something, it is moral. Otherwise, it is immoral. No? It would lead to conflict and contradiction. One should give reason why it is right or wrong. People have different sentiments, right? Feeling based on one common object or act. No? No universal norm of morality dito sa ethical subjectivism. And each has its own standard of morality. No? Each individuals have his own standard of morality. After sa subjectivism, we go now sa egoism, no? Ethical egoism. Ano ba to? So, basic principle, everyone should always act in his own self-interest, regardless of the interests of others, unless their interests also serve his. No? The ultimate principle of self-interest, itong ethical egoism. No? So, individual pursue his own interests exclusively. Individuals have no natural duties to others. Walang pakialam sa'yo. No? We have no moral duty than to promote one's own interests. No? Act is good when it promotes the individual's best long-term interests. So that is ethical egoism. And then expounded by Epicurus and Ayn Rand, ethical egoism or objective egoism. No? Ayn Rand, proponent of rational ethical egoism, as a rational human beings, sabi niya, we must act on our rational self-interest and to think about the interest of others is immoral. No? Doon pa lang sa sinabi niya is very immoral na yun, act na yun. Ayn Rand. So there are misconceptions about egoism. Egoism prefers only pleasant and happy experiences. On the contrary, egoism may prefer unpleasant and painful experiences and temporary sacrifice if this will advance a long-term happiness. So, egoism dislikes virtue like honesty and generosity, but on the contrary, as long as these virtues will advance the long-term interest, it practices these virtues. No? Grabe the egoism. And then egoism is the same as hedonism. No? Hedonism, while some egoists are hedonists, others identify good with knowledge, power, or rational self-interest. No? Hedonism. So the position of egoism is supported by three arguments. So we have number one, interests of everyone will be best promoted if each of us adopts the policy of pursuing our personal interests. Then number two, persons person has only one life to live. Then lastly, it allows one to view his life as the ultimate value. No, ito yung mga arguments that supported the position of egoism. There are two types of egoism, the personal egoism and impersonal egoism. The first one, the personal, claims that an individual should pursue his own best interests, but does not claim that others should necessarily do the same. No? Then the impersonal claims that everyone should follow his best long-term interests, no? Like Epicurus, Hobbes, Nietzsche, and Ayn Rand. No? Mga example ng mga philosopher na, na may impersonal egoism. So, just like the others, no, yung naturalism, relativism, no, meron din objection dito sa ethical egoism. Na sinasabi, the personal egoism is inconsistent and cannot provide solution to conflicting interests. What if everybody wants to promote his own interests? The result would be confusion and chaos. Di ba? It is arbitrary. It assigns importance on one's interests and inconsistent. Not clear whose self-interest should be satisfied. Others, just to promote their own interests, will simply manipulate people. It is complete disregard for a universal moral law. Okay, let's go now sa utilitarianism. No? So everyone should perform the act and follow the rule which will bring about the greatest good or happiness to everyone concerned. The greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. No, kanina tapos tayo doon sa self-interest. Ito naman lahat-lahat na, no? Everyone, no? Everyone concerned, no? That the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism. It is an ethical theory expounded by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So, Jeremy Bentham, morality, sabi niya, is not a matter of pleasing God, nor faithfulness to abstract rule, but it is an attempt to bring about as much as happiness as possible in this world. No? The ultimate moral principle, the principle of utility, Utility is equated with benefit, advantage, pleasure, happiness, and goodness. Yun yung tinutukoy na ultimate moral principle ni Bata. Now, between alternative actions, we have to choose the best overall consequences for everyone concerned. Kung may best na option para sa lahat, yun dapat ang piliin. How about John Stuart Mill? No, John Stuart Mill, no, principle of greatest happiness, so sa kanya, na sinasabi na ultimate end is an existence that is exempt from pain and rich in enjoyment. So the foundation of morals is utility. Greatest happiness principle, actions are right when they promote happiness. No? Yung sinasabi ni John Stuart Mill, actions are right when they promote happiness. And wrong when they promote reverse of happiness. Happiness means intended pleasure. Yun yung definition ng happiness, no? Intended pleasure and the absence of pain. No? Absence of pain. So there are two kind of utilitarianism, no? So we have one act utilitarianism and two rule utilitarianism. So number one, everyone should perform an act that will bring the greatest good over bad for everyone affected by the act. No? Then two, everyone should follow the rules, lahat, walang exempted, that will bring about the greatest number of good consequences for everyone concerned. No? Yun yung two kinds of utilitarianism. So number one, no, yung act utilitarianism is the right act is the one that produces greatest number of good, no, than evil for all concerned. It proposes the following. Letter A, actions are to be judged right or wrong on account of their consequences. And B, in assessing the consequences, the only thing that matters is the amount of happiness or unhappiness that is caused. And lastly, C, one's happiness is to be counted as more important than anyone else. No? That is act of utilitarianism. It overcomes a number of objections raised against egoism. It provides objective way to resolve conflict of interest. No, proposes standard outside self-interest. All parties appeal to uniform standard, the general good. It has logical consistency which personal egoism lacks, and it is able to take moral point of view. No? That is act of utilitarianism. And may objections din dito sa act of utilitarianism, no? The consequences of actions are uncertain. No, that is true. There is difficulty in determining what is good for others and danger of determining the social worth of an individual. Morality is not so much what the action produces, but the consequence of what the agent intends. No, yung tinatawag kanina, the non-consequentialist stand. Some actions are wrong no matter how much good they produce. No? Lying, violating a rule, but may result to good consequence, increase of sales, getting things done, even even helping the needy. No? So the principle of utility may in conflict with justice. Utilitarianism associates justice with efficiency rather than fair play. If the action is efficient, then the action is just. And then number two, no, tapos tayo dun sa act, and let's go now dun sa rule of utilitarianism. We should not consider the consequences of a particular action, but the consequences of the rule under which the action falls. No? Ito yung sinasabi dito. If obeying the rule generally produce more total good than violating it, then such rule should be obeyed regardless of the consequences in any particular situation. No? For example, imprisoning an innocent person. So George Berkeley offered one strong argument for rule utilitarianism. No? Sasabi niya, each time a person must make a moral decision, he must evaluate the consequences of the proposed action. Then, enormous difficulty would rise due to ignorance, indifference, and prejudice. The consequence would hardly be in the best interest of the general good. No, the traffic laws promote the best interest of all drivers, no, for example. So, in objection naman dito, no, it is difficult to formulate a satisfactory rule, no, dito sa rule of utilitarianism and devise a situation where we can test the effectiveness of a certain rules. No? Should we tell the truth when killer asks us about the whereabouts of a person he wanted to kill? No, mga ganon. Such qualification either weaken or compromise the rule that the result is more like an act rather than the rule of utilitarianism. Then, there is no way to decide between contradictory rules which produce equally desirable result. Never intentionally hurt someone unless the truth will hurt someone. And never intentionally lie even if the truth will hurt someone. This will produce great ratio of good than, than evil. Utilitarianism ignores what is blatantly wrong. It produces great ratio of good, but it compromises the value of the human individual. No? Utilitarianism equates morality with usefulness. No? Usefulness. What is useful or what will bring greatest happiness to the majority is not always moral. No? Please remember that. What is useful or what will bring greatest happiness to the majority is not always moral. Actions which are not useful are immoral. Whatever means would be moral as long as it promotes the greatest happiness of the of the majority. No? Whatever means would be moral as long as it promotes the greatest happiness of the majority. So ito yung mga objection to rule utilitarianism. No? Now, lastly guys, no, we have tapos na tayo dun sa tinatawag na mga terminologies, mga ethics, morality, kinds of ethics, no? Let's go now dito sa sorry, nawala. Ayan. Dito sa Christian ethics. So, Christian ethics. In Christian moral philosophy or ethics, there are moral laws, and these laws are constant and universal. They don't change. No? That is in Christian moral philosophy or ethics. No, they don't change. The standards by which we judge the morality of a particular action do not change regardless of culture, social acceptance, sentiments, self-interest, and utility. What is socially and culturally accepted is not always moral. Sentiments cannot be standard because they are usually biased and fleeting. Self-interests are always self-serving and may marginalize the interests of others. What is useful is not always moral, may not be useful to others, or persons can be object of use or usefulness cannot be object of morality, particularly in human relations. So there are two norms or standards of morality. No? In Christian ethics, we have the conscience and laws. Conscience refers to proximate norm of morality, the one that initially that tells us that action is good or bad, or the one that bothers us when we have done something wrong, or the last practical judgment of the intellect on the morality of an action. Righteous, righteous conscience, an action that judges an action as a right when it is objectively right and bad when it is really bad. Or erroneous conscience will give wrong judgment on the morality of a particular action. So we have those, no, number two, divine, natural, and human laws, which we refer to as the ultimate norm of morality, no, according to the Christian ethics. Laws, no, again, the divine, natural, and human, are the ultimate norm of morality. They are the ultimate standard by which we judge the morality of an action. An action is immoral if it is not in accordance with our conscience and law. We have to follow the dictate of our conscience, the rule of law. So the critical inquiry sa Christian ethics, no, if we accept Christian ethics simply because it is commanded, no, or simply because somebody tell us that is right, then we are falling into relativism. Yung kaninang topic kanina. But if we accept it because the church will support our intentions and our interests, then we are likely ethical egoists. Lastly, if we accept it because it will be promoting happiness of the majority and that will be useful, then we are simply being utilitarian. No? Lawrence Kohlberg stages of moral reason, no, sa Christian ethics. Reasoning about moral issues changes with age. No? The subject of intensive research by Lawrence Kohlberg at Harvard University. He sought to determine whether they are universal stages in the development of moral judgment. He presented various stories of moral dilemmas to children and adults of various ages and cultural background. Kohlberg presented children as a moral philosopher. No? Kanina topic natin kanina rin, no? Who develop moral standards of their own, not necessarily comes from parents, but emerge from the cognitive interaction of children with their environment. The first level is pre-conventional morality. Children consider right and wrong in terms of punishment and reward. No? Action is good because of the punishment for it, good reward, based on the expectation of others and the effect of his action to his image and community based on social agreement. The second level is conventionally morality. Morality is based on authority and one's duty. Action is good because of one has to do his duty and does not want censure or disapproval of authority. Morality is based on universal ethical principles, justice, charity, and equality. So the third level, according to Kohlberg, is post-conventional morality. Very few reach this state of level. So ito yung example dun sa level na no, punishment pag may ginawa yung good na boy or girl, social orientation, reward. No? Obeys rules to avoid punishment and conforms to reward. No? That's the first one. To, so,